Right, good afternoon, everyone. I will call the August 17th, 2023, the Moines MPO policy committee meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Ask for a motion, move. Agenda, motion, is there a second? Second. Motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carried. Item 3, minute meeting approval. Move. Second. Motion second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carried. Item 4, approval of the financial statement. Bill.
Thank you. We have the financial statement for you. This was reviewed by the finance subcommittee and the executive committee. They had no issues, and we recommended approval.
Okay. So the second, further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, carried. Item 5, public comment on MPO actions. Do we have anybody?
I don't believe we have anybody signed up.
Anyone like to address the MPO call? Oh. Hearing none, we'll move on. Item 6 is report and vote on the transload development and operational agreement.
Thank you. A few years ago, when the transload facility was being developed, we entered into an agreement with Moines Industrial. And part of that agreement stipulated that Moines Industrial was to repay the MPO up to $250,000 for related expenses as being fiscalated and facilitator of the funding. That payment was to be delayed, so it wasn't supposed to start until this year. When we started to go through the process to invoice Moines Industrial, though, we realized that we had already been reimbursed by the USDOT for our normal planning funds for those expenses, and therefore we would be ineligible to receive any additional funding from another party unless we want to pay back the USDOT. We don't really want to get involved in doing. And so that was the direction we got from both Iowa DOT and Federal Highway Administration. Therefore, we recommend that we remove that stipulation from the agreement, that paragraph 13. Legal counsel has put together a amendment to the agreement that was included with the agenda packet. We just recommend approval of that to make everything nice and clean. So that agreement still is in place and removes that stipulation from it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
If you don't have any questions for Dylan,
Move approval.
second, any further discussion? Got him. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Abstention by Matt McKinney. Motion carried. Walk out. Item 7, report and vote on the employee handbook.
Back in March, we brought the employee handbook. This was a question that was discussed by the executive committee a little bit. So we brought the handbook forward in March, and there was a discussion of needing to update this. A subcommittee was appointed by the chair, which was led by David Jones from Ankeny. That subcommittee did some homework on their own. They came back together a couple of times and put their recommendations. Legal counsel reviewed everything, and we have before you today the recommendation. I would note too that the handbook was last updated by the policy committee itself back in 2012. There have been some adjustments made since that time, and none of that has been brought forward to the policy committee. Therefore, that's why we want to bring everything to you. On the next couple of slides, I'll walk through what the changes were. So in addition to just some general grammatical changes and clarifications, Chapter 1 clarified that the handbook is the purview of the policy committee. So staff won't be making changes like we had been. It'll be up to this committee to do that. And it also added language that the committee will review the handbook periodically every couple of years. Chapter 2 makes some adjustments to drug and alcohol policy, and that will be fleshed out even further in the appendix that we'll talk about later on here. Chapter 3 made some minor changes to the appointment probationary period, increasing it from 3 months to 12 months. Chapter 4 is where we had the most changes and most discussion by the committee, and this has to do with attendance and leave policy. So in the current handbook as it stands now, there is no maximum for what can be accrued in vacation or sick time. So the committee had a long discussion of what seems fair with that. Didn't think that it can continue to be, go on accumulating forever. So the maximum accrual for sick time would be 1,200 hours. And I would note that when an employee leaves the MPO, they can convert their sick time to vacation time on a 4-to-1 basis. So that would equate to 300 hours vacation paid out. And then added language that up to 240 hours of vacation can be carried over each year, and a maximum 40 hours of that can be taxed out. And then it's a user. most anyone can carry 240 hours. The starting vacation rate was increased from 80 hours to 120 hours. And then there was some minor clarifications to bereavement and military leave for military leave compliance. Chapter 5 on the next screen here. This makes some reference to the policies that we already have about our salary schedule and the adjustment matrix and adjust the longevity bonus slightly. And then chapter 6, clarified language again around the military leave. The next, the final things here, we have a remote work policy. This is one of the things that staff had put into place and wasn't taken before the committee. So they reviewed that and agreed to continue with that remote work policy, but clarified that that can be available up to 2 days per week. So employees be expected to be in the office at least 3 days per week. And then there were some safety and liability issues with that we got clarified with our insurance provider to make sure that if someone's working from home and they fall, how's that handled? And then, like I said, Appendix D is the drug and alcohol policy. This was something suggested by legal counsel. We did not currently have a more fleshed out policy and testing program. So that was added in here. Actually have drug and alcohol testing. Those were the changes. If there are questions about any of this, I'm happy to take them, or any members of the committee, if you want to add anything or address any questions, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, this has been reviewed by the executive committee a couple of times, and we have it here for you for official today.
All right, thank you, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan on this?
I do have a question on that. Is there testing prior to employment?
Prior to employment, there is.
Companies are looking slightly differently at marijuana, smaller quantities, period, where, because you can live in Iowa, go to a neighboring state, get together, you with your college buddies. Well, tell me how you're sorting through that. I know that some of this is changing landscape.
Right. To be honest, we had not discussed that when we put this together. I'd have to go back and look through the policy in more detail to see what exactly it is testing for and what it's, what is allowed, what's not allowed. So I don't have a great answer for you on that right now. We can get into that. There's strong opinions from the committee and how we want to address that.
Really understanding that, I think that the discussion on with our type, it's what they're, especially if you're not driving a vehicle for workers.
Yeah, I would
don't
know
want to have things show up on 30 days after you receive the
Yeah, in the handbook for the testing procedures, it lists drugs that may be conducted, and marijuana is not on that list.
Fair enough.
But again, that's not the question. That's something we want to take a closer look at. We're happy to do that.
Okay. That's something.
I'm fine with it. If we're not testing for it, then we'll get it. Right.
So if that is there more. Approval.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carried. Item 8 is report and vote on the policies and procedures.
Thanks. This is similar to the one we just talked about, kind of on a similar track in a way. We again brought this forward. There's some questions earlier in the year about different policies that we had. So rather than kind of piecemeal send those out, we assembled them all in one document so that everyone had them in one location and that they could all be reviewed at one time. These were also reviewed by legal counsel. And then a lot of these are financial policies and procedures. So they were reviewed by the financial committee as well. I would note that a lot of these policies, and we'll see them on the next page, are things that we already had in existence. However, there were 4 policies that we identified throughout the process and just throughout the change in, transition and leadership that we thought we needed. So those were added here as well. On the next page, we start to list these out. I won't go through all these policies one by one. They're in the document. But this kind of just lists what they are. And you can see the chapters, what the policy or the procedure is, the source of the notes kind of tells you where it came from and whether it was existing or new. As you can see there, some of these policies, such as chapter 2, was a policy that was adopted only 6 years ago by the policy committee. Others, like the one next to it, the purchasing procedures, this was approved back in the early 90s, and it's still related to faxing documents back and forth. So we updated it to be a little more modern, but it is something in the spirit of what was approved by the MPO and that we've been working under all this time. You can see on there the 4 new policies that are listed. If we didn't have a policy, or I have to back up, there are some policies again that we've been working under that weren't necessarily approved by the policy committee. However, I put the source of where those policies came from. In a lot of cases, they came from the Omaha area MPO, because that's an organization we're familiar with and work alongside of on various things. So we just borrow from them. In other instances, like the credit card policy with this new one, West Moines finance director was on our subcommittee and said they just went through a process to identify their credit card use policy. So we took the work they did and changed the name. Took it from them. So on this page and on the next one, on the next slide, you can see the remaining policies. Again, if there's any questions about these and how to take them, they know that the finance committee reviewed the financial policies, the executive committee reviewed this as well, and recommended approval, and we recommend you as well.
All right, any questions from on this side?
So moved.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carried. Item 9 is to report and vote on the interim executive director annual review and compensation adjustment. I asked committee for Todd's resignation, we had a committee set up to evaluate Todd's background. And that was a committee comprised of Mayor Clark from Waukee, Tom Haddon, and also Councilperson Delgado from one. When Todd resigned, then Todd would have done Dylan's evaluation. There was nobody to evaluate Dylan at that point. So I asked him to evaluate Dylan and also to establish a recommendation for Dylan's salary as the interim executive director. So that is background. Mayor Clark, can you hear? I know you texted, I know you're having some problems. Can you hear? Can you report on this well enough, or if Tom Haddon's in the room, if you want Tom to report on that?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Perfect. And please, Joe or Tom, please fill in as you see fit, or if I miss anything. So yes, we did meet and a couple of times and discussed based on Dylan's goals last year, both those that had been assigned to him by the former director, as well as those that he took upon himself, his completion levels, and then a number of other characteristics of how he performs his job. Overall, the review was fairly positive, and given that the MPO has a fairly established table with regard to compensation increases that look at what rank you got on your annual review, that translates to a percentage increase, and then a COLA increase as well. And that made the recommendation fairly standard that we provided to you. It was exactly from the compensation table that the MPO has approved. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Any questions for Mayor Clark or Tom or Joe? So move. Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Both same sign. Abstentions. That motion carried. Item 10 then is a report and vote on the temporary salary adjustment for Dylan as the interim executive director. Courtney?
Absolutely. So based on that increase to the $118,000 for his role as assistant director, looking at that given the additional responsibilities he's performing as interim executive director, the committee discussed levels, and there was some debate between 10 and 15% increase as a temporary interim bump for the role he's doing, but really felt like there was a case to be made to getting him to a certain level. So that's where the 12.5% increase, it translates to just under $133,000 for the interim period, the pro rata portion of that as he's performing those executive director functions. Are there any questions?
I have a couple. This is Tom Hawkins, but so we talked about this a little bit, exec committee, about the range for the director. I know there's a range, and Dylan responded to that range. So this is within the range of the starting salary and the top end of the director for the MPO, consistent with the policies we've adopted now, right?
Yes, it's actually at the lower end. Yep.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? For both. Second, further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carried. Item 11, report and vote on the fiscal year 23-26 amendment. Zach?
Yes, thank you. We have a request from the Iowa DOT to amend the TIP. This is for a project on US 69. It is located in the city of Des Moines. It's a section of Southeast 14th Street that crosses over I-235 there. So it's a section between just north of the railroad viaduct there on Southeast 14th to just south of Fremont Street. And it's the northbound lane that is being worked on. It's a grade and pave. They're diamond grinding it, just doing some maintenance work on that. The federal aid amount on this is $400,000 with a total cost of $500,000. Does not involve any MPO funds. This is just DOT funding. And the request is to move that into federal fiscal year 2023. It's currently in 24, and they want to complete that project now. So they're asking to move it into 2023. So happy to take any questions you have on this. Otherwise, it's before you for your approval. It was approved by exec at their meeting last week.
I'll move it.
Motion.
Second.
Second. Second. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 12, report and vote on the water trails bill grant payment approval. Zach?
Thank you. Just wanted to put before you the partial payment application number 8. This application has been reviewed by Snyder and also by Polk County. Both of them have concurred with the amount on this payment. This one's a little bit less than what we've seen the last few months. We probably won't see one low like this again for a while, but it's in the amount of just a little over $325,000. $191,000 of this is immediately reimbursable for expenses that have occurred on site. Most of that going towards dirt work, removal of material, things of that nature. The remaining $133,000 is for stored materials. Just as a reminder, we can't reimburse for the stored materials until they're actually incorporated into the project. We are expecting in the next few reimbursements to start seeing some of these stored materials being incorporated into the project, and we'll be able to start reimbursing for those. I think currently we have a little over $1.4 million tied up in those stored materials. Next slide, please. As far as progress update goes, they've continued to work on the south bank downstream of the recreational drops. The water levels have dropped enough that they're able to start doing more work within the river. They've constructed a platform that will allow them to start laying riprap along the bank. They have not hauled as much rock this past month. That's one reason why we see a little bit lower of a reimbursement or the payment this month, is because they have not been hauling as much rock recently. The levee work on the north bank is wrapping up, and they will allow them to begin working on the maintenance path very shortly. They are anticipating that it'll take them maybe 3 to 4 weeks to complete that maintenance path once they begin work on it. Next slide. We discussed previously at exec last week, and I believe the month before as well, the ability of staff to begin approving these payments administratively versus having the board approve them. There are a few reasons for this. One, having board approval adds about 3 weeks to the process. Contractors who work with the DOT are generally used to getting paid within 2 weeks of the estimate. So it's kind of delaying that payment process a little bit. All these payments would still continue to come before the committees in our monthly financial statements. So you would still be able to review those. We will still report on those payments during our bill grant updates on water trails. Also, if there were any change orders, we haven't had any change orders yet, but if there are change orders that come through, those would still require board approval. We presented this to exec. Their recommendation was to approve the partial payment application number 8 with the addition to allow staff to administratively approve these payments in the future. So that would begin with the one in September. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Zach, this is Tom Hockenpole County. I'll move it. But if we get a second, I have just a comment to make.
All right, there's a motion by Tom. Second by Tom Madden. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I just, and this is more of a policy question, Mr. Chairman. Long term, what we do with this is something we probably just need to discuss as a group. And I could be wrong about this, so please correct me if I am. But so long term, I mean, this water trails project has taken a lot of staff time. I have supported everything that we've done, including giving staff the ability to make those payments without having to come back to the board, because it's a project that I think that's important to the region and what have you. Having said that, my question, and I think Councilman Gatto's brought it before. My question is, long term, as an example, earlier on the agenda, we had the transload facility, and luckily, Jolyn, thank you for your work on that. You discovered that the payments had already been made for staff time for the transload facility, and that was good work on your part and the staff. But having said that, how do we determine, and maybe I'm missing something, how do we determine, okay, we're going to charge staff time for a transload facility, which is a very important transportation infrastructure regional facility, charge staff time for that project, but not charge staff time for the water trails project? Unless, is that accurate what I'm saying? I need help here.
Tom, are you, just to clarify, are you saying charge staff time to a contract versus just the normal MPO funding we get from the DOT?
Yeah, I mean, well, number one, we had a contract with a transload facility. I get that, but and part of that included staff time. So I'm just this is the part I'm trying to understand, just from a regional standpoint. What do we charge staff time for, and what do we do not charge staff time for?
Yeah, Tom,
I just need clarification.
Yeah, that's something we need to clean up. Quite frankly, we've not been consistent with that. There's been some cases where we've done non-transportation projects where we always charge, but per the direction of the board, we're not going to be doing those anymore unless there's a really compelling reason to do so. So really anything that we will be doing going forward would be transportation related, and unless it's very hyper specific to one community and it's not a regional benefit, I think that those charges would, or the cost for staff and everything would come just to our normal DOT funds, to our planning funds that are put in.
Right. That's helpful. I just want to get clarification so in the future we're all on the same page and we're consistent with everyone that we work with on how we charge staff time. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Right, thanks, Tom. Any further discussion? Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstention. That motion carried. Item 13 is a report and vote on the comprehensive safety action plan consultant contract approval.
I'm going to provide you with an update where we're at with the contract approval for the comprehensive safety action plan. If you recall, we had 3 RFPs that were submitted for this project. The list of the consultants that submitted RFPs are on the screen before you there, as well as the selection committee that met to both review the initial proposals and then for the interviews. So I want to thank all those committee members for the time they spent to do that review. Ultimately, tool design was selected by the consultant committee. If you go to the next slide there's some more information on how that process took place. Ultimately, they had the highest score of 119 out of 145 total possible points. In July, we presented this to the executive committee and requested that they authorize us to enter into contract negotiations with Tool Design and their consultant team. So we proceeded to do that, have been working with them to finalize that contract. The drafted contract was included in your agenda packet. It was developed by Tool and reviewed by the MPO staff as well as MPO legal counsel. Legal counsel did provide some comments. There were nothing that I would call substantial. I'll allow Scott to elaborate on that. But I would note that the contract amount is not to exceed $1 million. And if you recall, we were awarded $800,000 in grant funds for this project, and it is a 20% match. So $200,000 will be coming from MPO reserves as it was approved by the committee at previous meeting. The grant agreement with Federal Highway USDOT is still being reviewed. We are anticipating that we should have that in the next few weeks, and we're hoping to have that on our September agendas for approval so that we can move forward with the project. We cannot have the consultant start doing work until we have that final grant agreement with USDOT approved. So still working through that. Expect to see that grant agreement come back to you next month, hopefully, if the DOT gets through their review. Otherwise, the contract is before you for your approval. I'd be happy to take any questions you have, or Scott, if you want to add anything on the review that was done on that contract.
The one thing I'd say quickly, thought the contract was pretty straightforward. I made a few changes. They accepted all the changes suggested. That was the contract, yeah,
Any other questions? Motion. Second by McKinney. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Both same sign. Abstentions. Carried. Item 14 is report on mobilizing tomorrow, Zach.
I want to provide you with an update on where we're at with the update to mobilizing tomorrow. As most of you are probably aware, we're required to update our long-range transportation plan every 5 years. The last time we did an update was in November of 2019. So the next update is due in November of 2024. So staff has been kind of working behind the scenes on this since probably fall of 2022. In November, for example, we started working with Iowa DOT. We've been having monthly meetings with them to work through our model. We also have HDR on a retainer to help us assist with the development of the model. And then also just been doing some data collection and background type work since the fall of 2022. Moving forward, we're going to be starting to see more work on this. Some of the goals that we have set for this plan update is that we don't really want to do a complete overhaul of the existing plan. We feel pretty comfortable as a staff with what the existing plan is, and so we're looking at more of a general update rather than doing a complete overhaul that we don't really feel like is necessary. One thing we would like to do in this update is to continue to improve on the readability and conciseness of the plan. This is something that we are, typically during our MPO review, this is brought up. We want to make sure that we're developing a plan that's easy for the community to access and read. And so anything we can do to help improve that by making it less text heavy, for example, is something that we're going to be looking at in this update. We also plan to release chapters individually for review. It's a large document. We want to make sure that there's adequate time for each chapter to be digested. And we feel like by releasing them individually for committees and board members to review is going to be a much better approach than releasing a whole document at one time. So those are some of the general goals that we have for the plan update. As far as a timeline of what you can expect to be seeing in the next couple of quarters through the end of the year, we will be working to finalize the model update. Our target is to finish that by the end of December. In addition, we're looking at updating our TAZs as well, and then the planning area and urban area boundary review and update. That's something that we will probably you'll probably see on the next agenda as far as what we need to do to update that. We've been working with the DOT in that regard. And then something else we'll be doing this through the end of the year is the project solicitation. So we will be reaching out to all the member governments and requesting that they submit any projects that they would like to see included in the long range plan. So that gives you an idea of the kind of work that will be coming before you over the next 5 or 6 months. As far as process changes go, there is one thing that we are wanting to touch base with you on. We did talk about this at the executive committee last month, and they didn't have any issues with it, but we are looking at not having a steering committee for this update. Generally, we do have a steering committee that helps guide the development of that long range plan. The reason that we're proposing that we do not have one this time is that we're going to have a steering committee for the comprehensive safety action plan that we just discussed. They'll be committing quite a bit of time to that, and it generally will be the same kind of people that would have been on our long range plan steering committee. And we feel that rather than try to make them do double duty, we want to be respectful of their time. And since we are proposing we just do a fairly basic update of the plan, we don't feel like it's necessary to take up people's time with another steering committee. So we will be leaning more heavily on our technical committee and our planning and engineering subcommittee to do the review of the technical aspects of the plan. And then obviously we'll be bringing all of the proposed chapters and changes that we're making to exec and policy as well. So we would like to get feedback from the policy committee if there's any concerns about not having a steering committee, but we just feel like it will be a better use of people's time to not have one during this update. I think I have one more slide that just kind of goes over the kind of what the review process would look like that we're proposing, where staff would develop a chapter. We would share that with the Iowa DOT to get their feedback. Once we receive that feedback, we would incorporate it into the draft chapter, allow the technical committee to review, and then incorporate any additional comments that they might have before we would send it over to policy approval, where we would share it with exec and policy, incorporate their comments following a public comment period as well, and then finalize the chapter with any comments that we received from the public as well as exec and policy. So that kind of gives you an idea of what that approval process would look like. And again, if there's any feedback you have on the steering committee issue, we'd be happy to take those comments now, or you can email them to us later.
Thanks, Zach. Any comments or questions for Zach at this point on the report only? All right, moving on to item 15. That's a report on the fiscal year 25 Iowa Clean Air Attainment Program 3.
Thank you. Just wanted to provide you with a quick update on the applications that were submitted for the pre-applications, that is, that were submitted for fiscal year 2025 ICAP funding. So we had 3 projects that submitted. That's a pretty typical amount. Usually we have about 3 to 5 projects submit. Ankeny submitted for their North Ankeny Boulevard improvements. They're requesting $1.9 million. Polk County for their traffic signal improvements project at almost $350,000. And then the city of West Des Moines for their traffic system vehicle detection improvement project at $732,000. So these are the 3 projects that submitted their pre-applications. As far as the process goes moving forward, we will present these items at the September meetings for approval. Following the approval of executive policy, we will forward on the resolutions to the project sponsors. That way they can incorporate those resolutions into their final applications, which they will be submitting to the DOT prior to October 1st. So just want to give you an update on ICAP pre-applications. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Okay, any questions on this item? Okay. Item 16, update on Purple Heart Highway, Gunner.
We have an update finally after months of waiting. To recap real quickly, you'll recall the Iowa DOT developed an action plan for us after stakeholder engagement, 4 basic steps were safety exemption for the minimum speed that allowed farm traffic on the corridor. 2 was federal exemption for weight that allowed heavy loads and soybean to go to 80. And the final 2 steps then would be a technical analysis that the fees for the version was technically appropriate. And lastly, was IoT to apply for the limitation. They passed that action plan out to local and then the Moines MPO together with the Greater Moines Partnership. I've been working on this since the time. I've done this to you before, but it bears repeating. I did it 3 seconds away. We started working with corridors in the agricultural sector, namely public corridor Billy Hunt. He has helped us get investments to Bill North, Association Bio, as well as like Team Hunt, that was like a coalition. We approached them about trying to do something with the corridor that was more than neutral for them, and find some way to make it positive for them. The idea that we approached them with was, what if we marketed this corridor for smart ag innovation development? They like that, and they then helped us formulate what became the factory kind of stakeholder committee. And we held 2 meetings late last year. I won't go through all the names here, but we have a lot of the important stakeholders here, including the Farm Bureau, specifically members of the Farm Bureau, the farmers themselves. And we've been an open part of the center. They committed to meeting again without us in the room so they could have candid conversations and provide us with feedback. We have been waiting for several months. We finally did have a follow-up meeting with Life Team of Little Northie. We got some positive feedback. There was approach and engagement. And there is interest to continue that engagement more broadly, not transportation. But we did finally come up against resistance, so to speak. It's not really a surprise to anyone who's been engaged in this conversation in the last years. The Polk County Farm Bureau did tell us that they were in opposition. I'm going to go into that a little bit more deeply. Something that we learned is that, this was unknown to us going into this process. It didn't come out during the stakeholder meeting. It didn't come out during the stakeholder meetings. It's something that we learned that Farm Bureau has a policy, started at the Polk County level. Basically says they oppose any conversion of the highways in states, taken viable from the revenue available for farming. It's interesting to know that policy started in Polk County. The last iteration of this conversation, maybe 10 years ago. And then it was adopted by the Iowa Farm Bureau and then moved to the federal level. So the conversation around this was there's a lot of animosity around it. I think but it was so much so that it influenced federal farm policy. So we only hear a while until back. Knew quite how steep that hill was. Nevertheless, here we are. Two notes here is we don't know exactly if that's the exact policy language. We're still in learning mode. This is how it was relayed to us by my team. So it's a good summary of what the position is, but we don't have the exact language. We're still trying to discover that. And then we also don't know how deep the opposition is. This is way, but we don't know if this is the flat red light and the stop or if it's the yellow stop. Nevertheless, that is where we stand today. Some of the other takeaways that I'd like to share is I do feel that, though we were coming from a deficit, we did improve overall relationships with the ag community. And the door doesn't remain open for ongoing dialogue. I will say that the word economic that women we conversations with, they're very open to this conversation. We were interested in it. For what it's worth, the Greater Moines Partnership does remain in the recruiting designation. I'll also say that as the next step, Iowa DOT, the MPO are meeting with the Oklahoma Farm Bureau this month. Meeting to discuss safety, potential safety improvements, but also give us an opportunity to learn more about the route. If you want to take one small side detour, this came out of our conversation with the farm stakeholders, and we just want to have it for everyone to take away from the awareness. Currently, there is a minimum speed exemption on the corridor that is given administratively by the Iowa DOT. In terms of the highways that are picking, then it comes down to stuff that US 69. One of the farmers suggested moving that western terminal farther to the west so they could avoid interchange US 69 and kind of a busy interchange. And so their proposal was, what if we moved it southwest near the tour? Mike Steen brought that suggestion to Stu Anderson of the DOT and myself. And Stu has been talking about the DOT, I've been talking about the corridor communities that will be affected. That's what the current taking stands right now. There's no red flag to this potential, but there's no definitive answer to it. What we just wanted to highlight this to you as the depth to which our engagement has gone and how much we've been working with them and try to accommodate and work with them on their safety of the corridor. This is an opening question I want to take away from this time. The last thing I want to mention is that we did a last met with representatives from all the corridor committees, either the executive committee representatives, either the policy committee representatives, in some cases staff, with those conversations as well. And we just put the cards on the table and said, this is what we know today. And how would you like to proceed? And we offer the full range of options. And generally, I would say, I would welcome any of the corridor communities to chime in on this, but I would say that there is general for, which is to say, keep the conversation going. Now we have a deeper understanding of their policy position. Let's talk about it and what we will alternatives look like. So I won't go into it too much further here, but I just wanted to relay that all the corridor communities want to continue having those conversations. So we're going to go through the meeting with the Oklahoma Farm Bureau next week. We continue to have conversations to try to get a better for the Farm Bureau and staff. So some of the other things that came out of our stakeholder engagement is that we're going to engage with elected officials. We've done that with the corridor communities. We'll continue to hear more from us and think how we look at the discussion point. There is going to be more asks to you in the role of the elected officials. We need to continue to collect additional intel from the stakeholders, landowners, seek campaigns in the sector. We're also checking the visual community. The difficult bridge that was removed and the question of whether to go back before you go. We're going to double check. See if there's any idea from you. We've heard conflicting reports on them. We're just double checking before we stand for. Another idea just voted was whatever is study with down to that's it for my update. Covered a lot of ground. We'll welcome to meet the corridor meetings from some of the question or comment to the time.
Carl.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So what's your sense of how many members can Polk County Farm Bureau farming members?
We've had that question for quite a few times and it's still the unknown. That's something that is on my list of questions for our conversation with the Polk County Farm Bureau. Sweet. My gut says it's 10, 10 to 20 maybe. The DOT did a camera study. I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago. It was done in the fall for a 6-month period. They put a camera on the bridge, collected data for 6 months, and then literally counted. It was a pretty small number. It's like less than 1% of the traffic.
So a Farm Bureau member is someone that just has their cars insured by Farm Bureau.
Your home is insurance through the Farm Bureau and technically a Farm Bureau member, but I don't think he's driving tractors on the corridor. That's a limited subset of.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, you the one to speak?
Yeah, this is another policy question. It's probably better for another subject, but you know, as I brought it before, you know, we've talked about this for a number of years. Gunnar and I talked about it, and we walked through some of the issues and what have you. But it's been a priority for the MPO pretty much every month for, I don't know, over 10, 12, 11 years, whatever it's been. And that's fine. I think it's a good thing, what have you. But how do we identify as an agency projects that we have on our agendas every week that we're all collectively working together on to get completed? And I'll give you a couple examples from way back when. The Southwest Connector. Ted Omar, West Des Moines, was driving the Southwest Connector every single meeting. Southwest Connector's done, right? Alice's Road. All the West Side communities were driving Alice's Road interchange. 36th Street in Ankeny. All the communities were helping drive that, and we had reports on them like monthly about where these projects were at and how we were collectively working together to fund them or what have you. So my question is this. This is a road that's already been built. It's already there. Transportation infrastructure is in place. The Southeast Connector stops at 30th Street. In my district, in Polk County, everything I hear and everywhere I go, from East Des Moines to Pleasant Hill to Altoona to Eastern Polk, everywhere, is when is that last stretch of the Southeast Connector going to be completed? Which they built the bypass with an interchange there for it, and it just sits there. We don't get reports on it. I don't know if Des Moines doesn't want to drive it, if it's not a priority for them, and I know I think it is. But unincorporated Polk County, it's important to me. It's important to people in Pleasant Hill. It's important to people in Altoona. So I need to understand how we prioritize projects like this.
So, Tom, Supervisor Hawkinsmith, this is Councilman Gatto. That's also my district. And I think I see Scott Sanders in there. Is Scott in the room?
Yes. Yes, yeah.
So, Scott, maybe you can give an update of where we're at with the Southeast Connector and how we intend, if we don't get the grant, how we intend and when we think that Des Moines is going to complete it, because it's important to us also to get that completed. Did you want to go through that?
Do you want that now, or do you want that at another meeting?
I'd like for you to give the update now.
And if that's okay,
Go ahead.
So we took a couple tries at the raise grant that was a successor build. I think everybody's familiar with that. And we are now shifting to a new grant opportunity, a federal grant that is more tailored to roadway projects that have a rail aspect to them. And so because we have the transload project that's on the Southeast Connector as well, we think this is a really good opportunity to put in yet another grant opportunity to finish the segment between East 30th and what I believe is like 43rd, something in that vicinity with the boundary of Des Moines and Pleasant Hill. And that application will go in next week. And we will be pushing pretty hard, obviously, to get that funding. That funding would allow us to finish the project. In absence of that, we've identified funding to at least get us to East 36th, and then take East 36 south to Vandalia, which then allows for DART to construct their new bus facility off of East 36. And we would have to, otherwise, unsuccessfully, if we do not get this next grant, we would have to look at local funding and make a pretty hard decision for the city. to get it finished. It still remains our top big property or project.
Thanks, Scott, and forgive me because I'm geographically, I'm struggling here. So, I mean, Des Moines, I assume would be asking for resources based on the section of the connector that is in Des Moines incorporated boundaries. So I know that our public works departments visit I know you get Chocolate Pleasant Hill and everything also. So is this thing all, my question for the MPO is, are we coordinating all this between all the jurisdictions so that we're all on the same page and trying to get this thing done and put as much effort as we are into renaming a road that's already been built?
No, I can tell you there's an awful lot of effort in this that includes Pleasant Hill. And then as we have identified options like this new grant opportunity, clearly we're getting endorsements from everyone that we can, including the MPO.
Okay.
On these grant applications. And the private side, you would imagine quite a bit of the Transglobe, Paul County and Gabe are in this. I just spoke to Libby Nelson at Hammond to get support for the project from other private businesses coming. So.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And there is MPO funds, there's STBG funds identified for that purpose.
Okay.
All right, any further comments regarding the Purple Heart Highway? All right, I'm gonna move up, item 19, Gunnar had a couple points, I just gonna move that up at this point to the Dennis, Gunnar, they have the floor here.
You got it. Thank you again. If you haven't noticed yet, we have a new website that went live this month. We've been kind of a soft opening stage. We're still working out a few bugs, but anything something that is operating as it should. There's a lot of it. So far, all the reviews have been positive from outsiders who are coming to visit, as well as from people who are using the system. One of the things that's going to be really nice is this isn't a live thing, but there's the agenda minute on the top page. There'll be one page new to go and get it. Part of any way you want. Last update was more than a decade ago, during the last quadrennial review, federal highways suggested that we do to improve navigation. Part of the update, we introduced a new logo that's easier to scale on mobile devices and sizes. I want to do a big thank you. The photos on the website and providing remember jurisdictions. Anywhere else, so we can just go to the same place that I've been going. I do want to note some of the links you may have in old agendas might be broken as a part of the process. If you ever encounter old agendas or you're looking for material and you come across the broken link, please just reach out to staff, all the documentation. The other thing I want to mention is that we are on the cusp of launching a new system for distributing our agenda, our newsletter and stuff. Delivery, which is operated by some software by it is used by the IWT as well as some other member governments. Big benefit here is that you can kind of self-manage these lists so that your constituents can sign up to receive all of the committee agendas, for example. Without having to take staff and those lists. I do want to make a note that new meeting next year could be tomorrow, probably early next week. Welcoming you to the new system. You will have the opportunity to go in and manage your systems and really want to be, you could also provide things. Please don't do that. Please continue to receive those, otherwise you might. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. We are also planning an anniversary celebration. This is the MPO's 40th year since its creation. So we're looking for actually two to Park West Morning. Dining and hors d'oeuvres will be on us. It'll be a buy your own drinks. And we're just going to invite here to help. We'll be getting by the way. It will be pickleball. The calendar sport.
I hope everybody can make it. I think it'd be good to celebrate and come together and without being in meetings all the time, to fellowship this. Please put that on your calendar. All right, with that, I was intending to go into closed session on personnel matters. We're not gonna be doing that this time. I'm not asking for a vote on this. Let me just give you a brief update and I'd be happy to answer other questions, either now or later, but I certainly don't want to have any discussion of any particular names, but let me just give some background. As you recall, after the executive director's in May, I did appoint a search committee. That search committee has met several times. I sensed that there was some impasse in where we were. I wanted to bring it back to the full policy committee, and really where the decision we've made on next executive director. Since the time that we developed the agenda, I think there's been some movement is to come back to a process where we will have the search committee develop the final process. Ask for another meeting of the search committee to convene again. I think we now have more of a clarity on where we're heading as far as the process. So we will do that. We do have a draft charter put together. I think finish that up. We do have an existing job description for the MPO executive director that I think we use that one. Have to review that and finish that up. So that's where we are right now. Again, I think we have some clarity moving forward, and we're gonna establish a formal process. That process will be followed, and I think it'll be we'll come back and we can. The council has clarified that we can keep initial applicants confidential until we get to a point where we have some finalists. So I think that will provide some surety to folks that want to apply for the job, that they will be kept confidential until we get to a finalist process. So with that, any other members of the committee want to chime in on anything at this point? If not, any questions? All right, that's where we are. Any other items for the good of the order for the MPO today? All right, our next meeting date is September 21 at 4 o'clock. End of the agenda. We've ended. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.